We are talking to Glass Battles. He is a Los Angeles-based singer, songwriter, and producer. Thank you for being on Out Cincinnati.
I'm so grateful to be here. Thank you for having me.
And so I was reading about your album coming out in the fall. What is the release date? And I guess my main question is, what is Spook Pop for folks who don't know? So it's kind of two questions in one.
Of course. Well, I guess I'll start with Spook Pop. Spook Pop, honestly, it's just like I make a lot of alternative pop stuff. I gravitate towards like minor chords and themes that, I guess for lack of a better word, have more of like a darker, spooky undertone. And honestly, like I've always felt that like spooky is sort of an umbrella term that like covers a lot of things. Like it's not just like, jack-o'-lanterns and stuff, but it's like, I feel like missed connections with people is kind of spooky. I think reminiscing about things that have passed is sort of like a spooky feeling, and all of that wraps together into kind of like the themes that come in and out of the album, which is called Glitchcraft. It's going to be my debut album, which is just crazy that it's happening. And then October 22nd actually is the release date.
That is really
I just
cool.
got a couple days ago.
So have you got like a vinyl pressing of it yet, or have you had that kind of a oh my gosh moment?
Nothing yet, because we actually just finalized the tracks all together. Because I have like the core handful of tracks, and there was a few that I was not sure if I'm going to do a larger release or if I was going to do a couple of separate smaller ones to supplement the album. But ended up all working together. So going to press the vinyl probably within the next week or two, and I have all of my music sent away essentially. So very relieving and also just kind of like terrifying because it's like,
Well, because what's in your mind? I mean, have you thought about, are you thinking about the next one already? Have you been thinking about it? I mean, I've never dropped an album, so that's kind of like daunting, it sounds like.
Yeah, it is. I've been in this sort of musical project for a long time, and it's taken many different forms and evolved in different special ways. But this album itself is actually volume 1 because it's going to be the first ever pop trilogy album. So the second one will be out next year in October, actually. So it's kind of like I basically have the next 3 years or next 2 years, I guess, 2.5 maybe, depending on when the third one. I'm like giving away way too much information, but it's just like the process is kind of spoken for the next little bit. So that's why I'm like letting everyone know. I'm like, I will be busy forever. So sorry.
It sounds like a relief, anyways. You know what's coming up. Have you decided on the for Glitchcraft? Have you decided on the cover art, or will you decide, or how does that process go?
Yeah, cover art is done, and that will be out as well. So that'll be a nice. I'm probably going to show that this week or next week. So
and can you drop a hint about what that, or can you kind of tell us what your inspiration was for that?
Well, the album itself like centers around the identities, which is these sort of like characters that are like culmination of themes on the album. There's the tempter, the empath, the protector, and the witch. And I guess the best thing I can say without giving away the actual album art is that it's a family affair. So,
okay, that can go a lot of ways, right?
Right.
Any family. So you learned. I read that you learned animation, and that there's something about a video game in the works. And I've seen some of the Instagram posts. I think they're the characters. Can you elaborate on that? That's really cool. And bravo to you for learning that. That's really something.
Sure. I mean, like it's so the album's called Glitchcraft, like I said too, and the video game will be the same name as well. And that's sort of it's projected to be coming out in the summer of 2020. So I've always sort of had the idea of releasing a video game with this album, just because there's a lot of elements that I think are interactive in a way, and I think that it'd be a really interesting platform for people to get to know Glass Battles outside of just like, I have an album, I have a single, I have a picture, blah, 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 and I think in the process, I started kind of getting into the development process for the video game last year, like earlier last year, and it's honestly like I taught myself animation not because I need to be in control of everything, but because like my resources are limited as an independent artist, and there's a lot of amazing animators that were available, but, to be perfectly honest, like at this stage in my career, I just don't have the financial fluidity to be, self-producing an entire album, recording everything, working through, promotion and content, and then also being able to fund the creation of the video game. So I taught myself the basics of 8-bit animation, and I'm going to be fleshing it out more in the next few months to completion. But at the moment, I'm doing essentially like frame by frame animations for landscapes, and then I do have the characters as well. And then in my video that I just released in September for Septilazine has sort of a closer peek at what's going to kind of come through with the video game. Each song on the album is going to be around in the video game, so there's kind of themes and color schemes and characters that are attached to each song that will be sort of a nice revisit when the summer arrives.
And tell me, Glass Battles, like, what is nerd question, as a video game lover, that back in the day, are there going to be cheat codes where you can get to different levels? And I don't think that it's Mario. I don't know. I mean, cheat codes would be lovely. I think I'm working with an amazing programmer right now, but I don't know that cheat codes are going to be a part of it. And I also, to be perfectly honest, I don't think the game is going to be so elaborate that that's going to be necessary. I think it's going to be a ton of fun. It's also going to be relatively straightforward, and I feel like a lot of things, even though I feel like the old Nintendo games were like harder than a lot of the new ones, because there was just sort of like you couldn't jump, you couldn't really do a bunch of stuff. It was like you could move where you could, and that was it. It took me years to get through Mario. I had to have those codes.
Oh, for sure. I mean, I don't even know if I got through Mario all the way. I know Super Mario Brothers 3, I got pretty close, and then Zelda was my favorite game, and that one, I don't even know if I finished that one either, just because it was my favorite. So I don't think there's going to be any cheat codes, because we'll see. It may be more difficult than I project at the moment, game-wise.
As long as it's winnable, right? It does, that's the more time people spend on the game, and more their experience.
For sure.
So what is you're telling me about the multiple hats you wear? What's your formal is your formal training in music, or how did you kind of get started?
Anyways, in terms of training, I'm actually self-taught. Like when it came to production, that was like in 2010, as I'm like aging myself. I think around then was when I started to kind of dip into it, because it was the same thing. Like I knew a lot of people that work with these amazing producers, and at that point it was more of like a pipe dream, because I was like, I would love to do that someday. And then I'm very stubborn when I want to do something, and even if I'm, a little bit impatient as well. So I was like, okay, well, I'm going to at least try my hand at it. And I've found that like learning these programs, like I taught myself on Reason, which is a production program, like a really, really old version from back in the day, and then moved over to Logic. And from there, just kind of like songwriting just became sort of a natural thing that accompanied that. And I've always been such a fan of pop music since I was very young, and alternative rock and that kind of thing. So I think my obsession with those two genres kind of blended together pretty easily, which is awesome. And then, that's basically, I guess that's where my specialty skills are now, but it started off as just self-taught, see what I can do, and hopefully it comes out nice.
If you have the ability to learn, there's no reason to not. So that's perfect.
Yeah. I agree. And I think, sorry, go ahead.
No, go ahead.
I was going to say, and I think that's a thing that a lot of artists that I know out here could really just utilize. Like everybody has the ability to learn these things, and I think a lot of people are afraid of doing something that's not going to sound popular. But part of the thing, the music industry has changed so much with digital releases, and I think people don't understand kind of the amount of control that they actually do have over the creation of stuff that they have, and they don't have to follow trends, and they can actually teach themselves and develop a sound that's authentic and unique to them. And I think everybody has that capacity. Any advice that I give any artist, if I'm rarely asked it, like, is usually just like, you can teach yourself. Like, this is not, you don't have to hire somebody every single time. Obviously you can, and it's amazing to collaborate, but there's a lot of resources you can develop yourself.
Well, you really are handing over part of your creative process when you say, lack of a better term, hire it out. It kind of, it's yours when your hand's in it, right?
Yeah, no, for sure. And you don't have to, like, and that's a lot, part of the reason obviously was being able to finance my own project, which is impossible at that stage and, you know, where I was in my life, just kind of like working odd jobs here and there. But like, it's also, it became like waiting on people's schedule and like waiting for people to get back to you. And I know that there's so many elements to the industry that are just frustrating for artists, like photos and videos and music and production and studio time is always on somebody else's, you know, watch. And it becomes this thing where you're constantly waiting. You don't really get to like dive in and do things as you know, get the idea for them.
You're kind of waiting for your turn, right? It's okay. It's the singer's turn to sing, and well, I did everything else too, so that's perfect. No, that's wonderful. So we're talking to Glass Battles on Out Cincinnati, and I really appreciate you joining us. You talked about digital music and music a little bit ago. How do you listen to music yourself? What I mean is, what platform? And then where do you think that people will experience your music, or in general nowadays? If it's not on radio, where is it?
I think, honestly, Spotify for me is probably just the most straightforward. I mean, I kind of like will dip into whatever. I like to, because, you know, being an artist, I like to be able to check out the other digital avenues that have supported and released and distributed my music as well, just because I want to give everybody equal airtime, but Spotify seems to be like the most user direct type of thing. So, I mean, and that's me, the way that they combine stuff too, like they also have like playlists that they curate for people based on what they listen to and based on what they like. And a lot of those things have been how I've gotten like listener traction, has just been through like, if you like this, you might like Glass Battles type of thing. So I'm like super thankful to Spotify, and I mean everybody, but like they've just sort of put in a lot of different networks for me to be able to reach other people with my music.
And who do you love on Spotify or wherever you grab your music? Who are you listening to now?
I'm actually like, I'm still stuck in like the same spirals of artists that I have been for a while, but my favorite artists that I'm still streaming all the time are Garbage is my favorite band of all time. Like they always have been. And Goldfrapp, Yona Lee, I really love Kim Petras. And Robin, I guess, and Dragonette. Those are the artists that I kind of like will always be at the top tier of things. So they're the ones that I think influence a lot of what I do. And I think that I've always gravitated towards females in music just because I think that there's less self-consciousness in terms of like who that they see themselves as artists. They don't, you know, I think women have there's a lot of predilections about women in the industry and what they're supposed to be, and the ones that rebel against that are like the most powerful like creatures on the planet. And I've always, you know, been magnetized by that type of thing.
And what's your take on the music, the industry in general? We've heard a lot of crazy things, at least about the film industry, and then there's crazy stuff everywhere for women being so empowered. And I think about Rihanna, Mariah Carey, all those powerhouses, but then there's the old boys club in music too. How have you experienced the music industry? I mean, has it been like you've seen in the news, for example?
I mean, I think honestly, like as, you know, a white male, I think I'm always going to have like a element of privilege that it will always be something that I have to acknowledge and understand, like where my position in the industry is, because I'm not a woman, I'm not a person of color. And I think that women always have the harder time in any industry. And I think that I would like to say that a shift is in the midst of happening. And there's so much of a longer way that we have to go as an industry and as sort of like a creative umbrella for everyone, that I think that it's been interesting and wonderful to see, you know, a decent growth in attention and acknowledgement and understanding of women, people of color, and, you know, even the trans community within the music industry. It's slowly shifting, and I hope it, you know, speeds up for everyone's sake. But I think that
I mean, I was going to ask you, like, I spoke to Dionne Warwick a few months ago, and she told me, and I'm not dropping names, she told me, you know, in the 80s, my hairdresser was gay, my driver was gay. What's it like? You know, my point is the LGBT community has always been everywhere, especially in the music community. What's it like for the LGBT community to be in the music industry? Is it kind of like a cool thing to be LGBT and be a musician?
I mean, it's definitely something that has, you know, I think the awareness and cultural acknowledgement has grown. I think that there's, even within the LGBT community, I think that there's a lot of kinks that people are still working out in terms of sort of mutual support and community efforts. And I think that even within LGBT, there are still challenges of perception and awareness. For example, I think that, you know, like a white gay man is always going to kind of be received as sort of the face of part of that community, and it seems to always be highlighted first. And I think that that's definitely an issue and an extreme challenge. And I think that, you know, it depends. There's a lot of media in LGBT that is confusing to me, because I see a lot of articles that gain, you know, thousands and thousands of shares and likes, and it's basically like 12 hot white muscular dudes that are on a calendar for something. But there's a lot of trans artists that are still struggling to find the reception they deserve because they're amazing artists. And I think that, you know, we have a lot to grow even as this community that's supposed to be all about sort of lifting each other up. We have a lot to learn and adapt to in terms of, you know, the lesbian community, the trans community, the intersectional, the community within a person of color who's also a female or lesbian or trans. And, you know, I think it's a work in progress for sure, but I think that as a whole, the LGBTQIA community has definitely, you know, entered a very moderate zeitgeist of acceptability within the industry in terms of sort of general audiences, and that's nice, but there's definitely a lot more work to do.
And what do you think about the acronym? Because I always try to say LGBT plus, because then if you're leaving off letters or adding letters, does the acronym matter as long as you're being respectful?
I think so. You know, I think that's also something that if there is, like, the way that I've, you know, the things that I've learned over the years, just because the awareness of groups of people is growing, the awareness of, you know, we had talked about pronouns briefly before. As information becomes available, I think it's important and needs to be at the forefront of like showing respect for these communities of people, because if you know it and it exists, even if it doesn't make sense to you or if you're confused, there's so much education that you can take on. But at the, you know, bottom line is, if it exists, like, utilize it. These people need to be represented, and if they feel that, you know, part of an acronym is part of the importance of being represented and acknowledged, then there's definitely, you know, do it, because that's why it's there. And I think that it's, you know, I certainly, as a white gay man, don't get to decide what I think is important for the acronym of a community that I'm a part of. And I'm here to, you know, learn it and evolve and understand and just be in acceptance of what somebody who identifies a certain way tells me is important to them.
It's really simple when you boil it down. It's about respect and understanding, period.
Yeah, absolutely.
So I was reading that you're involved with Music Cares. Now, I've heard about Music Cares. What do they do, and what's your involvement?
Music Cares is a charity that's based around helping recording artists in a time of need, and it's something that I honestly have never really heard about anything quite like it, because it's a big part of the music industry and a big part of being a recording artist in lots of genres, and especially sort of like the confluence of like EDM popularity and a lot of like touring. There's a lot of attachment to the lifestyle of, like, you know, partying and sort of like hyper socialization in order to gain popularity. And the charity is based around people that, you know, perhaps fall into a lifestyle that, you know, spirals into living with addiction issues and challenges, and also financial issues. And the charity is based around helping those in need. And I think that's very important, because even if it's not something that an artist utilizes, just knowing that there's a network of people that actually think about that and care about it, because, you know, there's so many, we've had a lot of lives lost in the industry even in the DJ community and the EDM community over the past handful of years that have been, quite monumental. And I think that having those avenues is so important because, you're trying to keep up with an extreme lifestyle in order to, either be perceived as or to feel that you've made it in some sort of a way. And I think addiction and honestly, like financial challenges and issues and mental health challenges, and it's, all of that deserves that extra awareness. I feel like I'm spiraling into babbling, but it's, it's one of those things where it's just a support system that is important, that is rarely talked about because there's nothing glamorous about talking about, mental health, and there's nothing glamorous about talking about financial issues, and there's nothing glamorous about talking about addiction. And those things are harsh and extremely common realities that I think people would perhaps find ways to suffer less if they understood that they were being supported and acknowledged as well.
Absolutely, and I will post information about MusiCares. It sounds really important to. That is something that people don't think about. People assume, oh well, he or she's doing fine. It's a signed artist. They must, have endorsements and no problems. And,
right.
Kind of the rosy life, and that's an important thing.
That's a huge part of like promoting yourself as an artist, is that sort of unfortunate social media perception where things, nobody, you won't really know until you're walking in their shoes, or if you're lucky enough to be close enough to somebody to where they feel comfortable being able to share those not so, happy parts of their lives. And that, that sucks for an artist to be able to be in a place and not feel like they're even allowed to be honest about the truth about things. But it's like one of those like secret things that we all share, especially artists and people trying to pursue something in this insane industry. Is like if we all knew that a lot of us are, if not the majority of us, are on the same page in terms of things that we go through, like this process of community within the music industry would be a lot easier to obtain.
Kind of in the same boat, and maybe you should realize it. We're all human. So
yeah, of course. And it's like if you're creating too, I mean, like the point of the industry is to entertain, and at least in my opinion, and I think that a lot of people like take for granted all this amazing art that's coming from artists in all fields, not just music. And I think that it's nice to have a charity and a version of a network to support the things that we enjoy on a daily basis. Like there's so much saturation in the music industry of releases of new music, but all of these people, in some respects are working extremely hard to do things to entertain people. And I think that like, there needs to be support and awareness for those people. Yeah, I mean, to be frank, yeah.
So tell me, you told me the other day that you were getting ready to go into the studio, and I was like, okay, that's a catchphrase, right? And it was a joke, right? So my point is, when you're getting ready to go into the studio, how do you prepare yourself? What do you do? Do you have a cup of tea? What's your mental process before you go in and create?
I wish I had a lot of something like a prepared answer, being like, oh, I have a hot water with lemon in it. But I mean, the reality is like I'm usually grabbing a Diet Coke from 7-Eleven and like hopping in the car to where I record my vocals, because I'm doing all of the production, mixing, and engineering myself. So this process of creating the album has been very disjointed in a pleasant way, but still very kind of discombobulated, where I'm going to record vocals. Once they're done, I basically put them on a USB, take them home to my little studio setup, and then I kind of just go through and I've been, chipping away at each song mix-wise and engineering, which is another thing I just, started teaching myself, because same reason, like a couple of the songs in the album I recorded in other studios that are incredible studios with incredible engineers. One of them is Forward Studios, and Tim and Matt are two of the engineers there, and they're so great, and they worked on a few of the earlier tracks with me. Unfortunately, it's just one of those processes where it becomes expensive. Even for them who have like extremely reasonable rates for this kind of thing, like it was just becoming that thing where like factoring in hourly, and I found myself in these amazing studios getting anxiety about the clock ticking. And so I think the positive takeaway right now is that like I can actually sit down with these songs and take my time, and if it gets to a point where I'm not happy with how things sound at my disposal, then I can obviously then take them to people that are perhaps more directly suited to this craft to, help me or offer whatever. So it's been nice, but it's been busy, and I don't have a process. I just kind of go in and have a good time, and I stop when I'm done mentally or emotionally, and I keep going if I'm not, and kind of just play it by ear. And that's sort of the whole theme of everything with this album has been like, do what feels good, do what feels authentic, and don't do what doesn't.
And let me ask you, this is kind of a token question. I want to remind people that your record, Glitchcraft, you can find it. Look it up, Spotify, everywhere that music is available. Glass Battles, thank you for being with us. I want to know what you would tell an 18-year-old Glass Battles, or just advice in general. If you could like look at yourself in the face, what would you say?
It's crazy. An 18-year-old Glass Battles before he was Glass Battles. I think I would probably tell myself, I've always been very stubborn. I've always had like an idea, or at least even a fantasy of what I wanted to do with my career or future. I think I would tell myself to stay focused and not be distracted by the myriad of things I've gone through in Los Angeles to adapt to, being a young adult in a crazy city like this. And I think that, everything happens for a reason. The timing of everything is exactly where it needs to be right now. But I would say, get your shit together a little bit and, focus on what's really important to you, and, don't lose confidence, because, this industry is tough. I have dealt with wonderful people. I've dealt with difficult people, and I've had the pleasure of working with wonderful people as well. And a lot of people are going to tell you what they think you're supposed to be as an artist and how you're supposed to do it. And I'm still getting that, every week there's a version of that. And it comes from a place of people wanting to be involved, and a lot of people that, are sort of misjudging their, my abilities in terms of what I can create. So it's just stay focused and continue working, and don't let the shitty people get you down, I guess.
And you can follow Glass Battles on social, it's at Glass Battles everywhere, correct?
Yes, Glass Battles, GlassBattles. That's on Instagram, Facebook. I'm on Twitter. I don't ever use it. And I also rarely use Facebook. It's like Insta's the way to go. If you want to find me, Spotify and Instagram are probably the best avenues to be up to date with everything that's going on. Glitchcraft comes out in October. It is October right now. October 22nd is when Glitchcraft comes out. And so listen to my singles if you'd like, and hopefully I'll see you guys soon.
It is an amazing experience. What I've heard so far, check out Glitchcraft. You can find it wherever music is available. Thank you, Glass Battles, for being on Out Cincinnati.
You're so welcome. Thank you so much for having me. It's been a pleasure. Thank you so much, Christopher. And I can't wait to hear what happens next with you guys.